Good morning, everyone. My name is Momina Saqib. I am the country director for the MDF program in Sri Lanka, and I'm very pleased to welcome you all to this virtual event. Today, we will be discussing the business case for climate change adaptation, particularly for agribusinesses. So we have designed this event as a collaboration between the Australian government-funded Market Development Facility Program and the Ceylon Chamber of Commerce. This event is designed to be the first in a series of events on this topic, which is very timely, very important. And we would be discussing business-led strategies to address climate change challenges facing Sri Lanka. Today, we are very lucky to have a panel which brings a world of experience, insight, and leadership on this topic. And our panel represents different segments of agribusinesses in Sri Lanka. We have Mr. Dilhan Fernando, the CEO of the Dilma Ceylon Tea Company, as our keynote speaker. Thank you very much, Mr. Fernando, for participating in this session and joining us today. We also have Ms. Shia Vikramasinghe, who should be joining us a bit later, Group Managing Director of CBL Group. Mr. Charita Subasinghe, President Retail of John Keel's Holdings. Dr. Rohan Fernando, Managing Director for Aitken Spence Plantations. And later we will all be also joined by Dr. Giriraj Amarnath, who is the Principal Researcher at the International Water Management Institute. This panel brings a lot of leadership, a lot of expertise, and we would be opening up the panel for question and answers. So we would really encourage for you to pose your questions to the panel from the audience. If you look at your Zoom, you will see at the bottom, there's a question and answer tab, and there's no restriction on it. It's open right now. You can type in your question at any point during the discussion. You can put across an open question or also specifically to a particular panelist. Last but not the least, I would also like to introduce our panelist, our moderator, Mr. Nishtar Kasim, who's the senior journalist and the editor of Daily Financial Times, who would be posing questions to the panel and also taking your questions. For our audience members who are joining us from Facebook or LinkedIn, I would let you know that the question and answer facility is not available on those platforms. But if you intend to ask any questions, the Zoom room is available to everyone. There's plenty of space, so feel free to join us in this room. With this introduction, I would like to invite Ms. Amanda Jewell, the Australian Deputy High Commissioner to Sri Lanka, to formally open this event.
Ayubowan, Vanakkam, Assalamu Alaikum. Thank you very much for having me here this morning. The Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change, or the IPCC, published a landmark report earlier this month, indicating a code red alert for humanity. The past 5 years have been the hottest on record since 1850, and the recent rate of sea level rise has nearly tripled compared with 1901 to 1971. It is virtually certain that hot extremes, including heat waves, have become more frequent and more intense since the 1950s. So with these high temperatures, the changes in rainfall and extreme weather events like floods, these are being increasingly felt across Sri Lanka at varying levels. So Australia's role in fighting climate change is to address climate change, which is a major risk to sustainable development and is threatening global efforts to eradicate poverty. Australia is keen to support Sri Lanka adapt to climate change and to plan, prepare for, and respond to climate-related impacts. Australia, through the Market Development Facility, is actively partnering with various stakeholders in the private sector to support innovative solutions to climate change, including those that engage private sector investment. And Australia supports climate change investments in the agricultural sector, as it is a sector that is socially inclusive and provides greater opportunities to boost women's economic empowerment. So now to get to the important part of my speech about MDF. As Australia's flagship private sector development program, MDF in Sri Lanka has pivoted focus to climate change in 2021. In the past 5 years, MDF has been actively working with our partners, government, industry, and the private sector on innovative solutions to address constraints to climate change adaptation and encourage mitigation. Building on that work, MDF's goal is to provide greater support to these sectors in a more socially and environmentally sustainable manner through our new portfolio in climate change. Sri Lanka needs to adapt to the rapid global shift towards sustainability to remain competitive, and MDF is actively supporting this transition. Climate change is part of MDF's broader inclusivity framework, and MDF supports climate change investments with a focus on the poor and vulnerable. MDF advocates for women as powerful change agents in building climate resilience and enabling a unified response to climate change mitigation. MDF is also has a strong private sector focus on climate change as being vital in a robust and inclusive and sustainable recovery from COVID-19, particularly as the world copes with challenges posed by COVID-19 pandemic. Sustainability has become an essential cornerstone for building resilience of our businesses and investments. Entering the global markets with sustainable produce is now more crucial for ensuring Sri Lanka's economic recovery post-COVID-19. And so this morning, I'd like to thank our panelists, Mr. Dilhan Fernando, Ms. Shaya Wickramasinghe, Mr. Charitha Subasinghe, Mr. Rohan Fernando, Mr. Giriraj Amanath, and of course, our moderator, Mr. Nishad Kasim, also, of course, to the Ceylon Chamber of Commerce, the International Water Management Institute, and our very close partners in MDF, and hope that this event provides a wonderful opportunity for business leaders in the agriculture sector to come together to discuss common objectives to expand climate change mitigation and adaptation, to increase profits and advance business models at the same time. So thank you very much for the opportunity to open this, and I look forward very much to the panelist conversation. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Deputy High Commissioner. I would also like to mention to all the participants that in the chat box, we have pasted the link and details about what MDF does, details about challenges facing Sri Lankan agribusinesses with regards to climate change, and how most importantly, how businesses can initiate a conversation with MDF to put in place adaptation strategies. All of these documents, these resources are available to download. So please click through, please reach out to us. And with that, I am delighted to invite Mr. Dilhan Fernando, the CEO for Dilma Tea Company, to present his keynote address.
Hi, good morning, everyone, and thank you for the honor of an invitation to share some thoughts. I think everybody has read in the media the summary of the IPCC report, and my intention is really not to dwell on that, but rather on the lines of what Amanda concluded, to focus rather on the opportunity that there is in adopting a fresh mindset and different attitude towards the crisis we face. But first, a little bit of the context. The IPCC report is remarkable because it is an international collaboration among scientists who have come to an agreement. I believe there were some 14,000 people involved, which is remarkable. But the essence of what you can see in their summary is the fact that clearly the last decade was hotter than any period in the last 125,000 years. There is a link between specific weather events and human-induced climate change. They also narrowed the estimated range for how temperatures respond to greenhouse gas emissions. But importantly, they conclude also that the Earth rewards good behavior amidst all of this crisis. So bringing that to a Sri Lankan context, and particularly looking at agriculture, temperature rise in Sri Lanka is predicted to be a little bit lower than the global average, but nevertheless, we face significant threats as one of the hottest countries in the world from extreme heat. The number of extreme hot days that is more than 35 degrees, I think currently is something like 20, and it's expected to hit 100 in the 2090s. Under possibly a significant emissions pathway. But that threatens everything. That threatens human health, it threatens disease, it threatens living standards, it threatens communities in every possible sense, not simply from agriculture, but also in terms of tourism and other economic activity. But where agriculture is concerned, the impact on yield is what we need to really understand, and particularly in key staples such as rice, which we're also already seeing. So in addition to the yield, the impact of extreme climatic events, some things that we see in the newspapers on a daily basis, not only in Sri Lanka, but globally, landslides, flooding, unimaginable previously extreme weather events, whether it is riverine flooding or any form of extreme heat. The impact on the human health, on the ability of people to continue with business as normal is clearly there. So that also contributes, particularly flooding, to transmission of disease. And we see floods on a regular basis. We came to expect it, but now it has become something that is abnormal, even looking at the trends of the last 10 years. But the most important thing there, or a significant thing there, is that what this does is it impacts the poorest, the most marginalized, and it significantly exacerbates poverty, inequality, and creates social issues that ultimately have a destabilizing effect on business and on the country. Now, looking back, 2005, the Stern report on the economics of climate change, Nicholas Stern, I think he's now Lord Nicholas Stern, he gave us a very attractive proposition. He said, look, we still have time. There is a time to, we have time to avoid the worst of what he wrote in his, I think it was 700-page report. He also told us that there is a substantial economic cost, but he explained to us that the cost of mitigation is substantially less than the cost of confronting the worst of climate change. And he said, look, it's about collaboration. This was in 2006. He also proposed a number of solutions because the technology existed, the solutions existed, and we could have cut emissions. We could have had deliberate policy action that would have led to a very different IPCC report in the last few weeks, but we didn't listen. So bear with me, I'm leading up to something a little bit more positive. And that brings us to Sri Lankan agriculture specifically. Agriculture is one of the most significant sectors in this country. I don't need to tell you, anyone who travels out of Colombo will see its impact. Its GDP contribution may be less than 10%, but the important thing is there are an estimated, according to Gunasene, 72% of the national population indirectly involved in agriculture. And of course, directly it's 25.3%, but still that indicates, yes, a significant social impact, but also it indicates certain amount of underutilization, underemployment, etc. So when you frame that existing issue in a context of the fact that globally climate change is expected to reduce crop yields by between 10 and 25% by the end of the century, we can clearly see we have an issue. We have a very serious issue relating to food security, relating to our export economy, but also relating to instability, social instability that could be the result of the weakening rural economy. Now, bring that forward to a different dimension. You know, many of us in business, we yearn for normal, but we must remember that it is normal that led to this situation. And this is not a normal situation. It is a combined health, humanitarian, ecological, economic crisis. And I think possibly looking for people who might chart a way out of this, one of those who I found incredibly illuminating was Mariana Mazzucato. She's a UCL professor, and she wrote a book about the value of everything. If you haven't read it, please do read it. She talks about the conventional notion of value creation as in fact being value reduction or destroying value. And let me explain. Even if you look at the theory of capitalism, it involves the creation of value across natural, social, and finally economic aspects. So when you simply look at one, often at the expense of one or two of the others, it is value destruction. And how Mazzucato frames this is in the fact that over the years, in the name of innovation or in the name of competitiveness, countries have scaled back public utilities. Look at our greatest asset today, a functioning, well-equipped health system. We are scrambling for health resources, and yet in virtually every nation, health has been marginalized to an unacceptable extent for the perceived benefit of business. And so I think here, I want to also bring in something from another, not an economist, but a person whose theory of evolution is still sustained. Darwin, he talked about it is not the strongest species strongest of the species that survive, nor the most intelligent, but the one that is most responsive to change. Now, when you talk about change, again, whilst yes, many of us yearn for what was norm, we need to understand that every business is the product of its environment. I'm not referring to its natural environment. I'm referring to its, yes, of course, ecological, but also economic, social, and other aspects, every aspect of its environment. Look at our environment today. The world faces this multitude of crises, one greater than the other. The world faces volatility and chaos, and yet the green economy is overtaking the fossil fuel industry. Globally, the green economy is estimated at $8 trillion. The global ESG investing, last estimate, I think a few weeks ago on Bloomberg, talks about it hitting $53 trillion, not by 2030, but by 2025, a few years down the road. China has set a 2060 target to decarbonize its economy. And it's not without its challenges. I know it sounds simple when I talk about these concepts, but the idea is that they are dynamic, they are opportunities. And when you frame that in where the opportunity that Amanda spoke about, we need to look at a fundamental change in mindset. As businesses, we see agribusiness challenged in an unprecedented way from the plantation sector. I can tell you, yes, after 150 years of using the same soils, cropping the same soils, we see a fundamental difference. You cannot continue to increase your reliance on artificial inputs and substitute nature. No, it needs a fundamental change in mindset. Rather than trying to dominate nature and use artificial inputs to do that, it can't be done overnight, of course, but we need to learn to collaborate. And there are methods. There is agroforestry. There is different types of mediation that are possible using, for example, using the opportunity in blue carbon and taking the seaweed, using those as natural fertilizers, enhancing organic matter in the soil and building resilience against climate change. Now, it's essentially a mindset that requires us to embrace rather than deny the changes that are happening around us. And it's not that difficult. It is a mindset and an attitude because the solutions are there. They were there in 2005 or 2006 when Lord Stern released his report, and they are today. When you look at nature-based solutions, some of the work you see from Wageningen, from the Oxford Nature-Based Solutions or Biodiversity units, solutions for rehabilitating soil, addressing food security, addressing human health, urban infrastructure, addressing pollution, addressing mental health, addressing manufacturing challenges, stimulating our economy whilst helping us to mitigate the worst impacts of climate change. And so with that, I want to conclude by explaining or encouraging you that we have the tools, we have the technology that creates the enabling environment. We have the knowledge. In fact, we had the knowledge for centuries because in what our ancestors, what traditional knowledge was passed on to traditional communities is incredibly important today. Of course, it has to be adapted to scale. But when you consider the mindset or the attitudinal change required, we have every single element that we need in technology, sensor-based agriculture. We have nature-based solutions in abundance. And we have the solutions to mitigate. Yes, you can't avoid certain aspects. Maybe sea level is going to rise, but we can address the impact of social instability, the impact of economic instability, food security that could create the worst possible scenarios that we see in IPCC. So with that, I would like to simply conclude that we need to change from an attitude of confrontation. We need to change to one of collaboration with nature, because in collaboration, we have incredible potential. Because remember what the IPCC report added, the earth rewards good behavior. And that good behavior is rewarded within a matter of years, maybe a decade or so, but still it is rewarded. And then we need to act. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Fernando, for your very insightful remarks and for showcasing the connection between climate change, adverse weather events, those connect to agricultural yields, and how that sort of results in inequality and worsens it and exacerbates existing challenges, which ultimately affect business growth and economic growth. In our panel, we have experiences from all sorts of agriculture produce companies, individuals who have firsthand knowledge of challenges that are already emerging, but more importantly, also strategies that they've been employing to address those. What's their thinking? What are their strategies? And now I will pass it over to our moderator, Mr. Nishtar Kasi, to initiate the panel discussion and hear from our panelists. Thank you very much again.
Thank you, Momina and Amanda, for setting the stage, and of course, Dilhan for making a very sort of a thought-provoking presentation. I must tell that globally, there is a trend that private sector cannot wait till government take action on climate change, but pursuing their own initiatives. And I think today we have an excellent panel of private sector companies who are walking the talk in terms of managing the climate change and how agribusiness can succeed despite the challenges facing. In the interest of time, I would like to start off with the panel discussion. I will pose few questions to the eminent panel, and then we will take up some questions from any of the participants. And I hope everybody will make it very interactive. Answers to the questions, I prefer it to be very precise, Sahin, and maybe to the point, hopefully, so that we can get everyone to talk, comment on the issues we have. I'd like to invite Charita to tell the audience as to how what are the real challenges faced in the agriculture, retail, and export sectors because of the shifting climate patterns we are experiencing in Sri Lanka particularly.
Nishta, good morning. Thank you very much for inviting me into the panel discussion. I will talk to you specifically about the vegetables and fruit industry, because that is where I worked very closely with the farmers to get the crops, the vegetables and fruits into our chain of supermarkets. I think there are three elements that Dilhan talked about, which is very relevant to the Sri Lankan farmer. That was the one thing is the social unrest that could cause if there is a failure of a crop, the food security aspect, as well as thirdly, the mindset change. The mindset change, I believe, is the most relevant thing for us to be approaching a solution for the climate change that is very relevant today. Simply because I think if you look at the centuries, we have been blessed with unlimited resources. I think that is the biggest one. Simply because, and therefore, if you look at it, when it came to the water, unlimited, the rains came at the right time. We had the Yala Maha harvest calendar, very precise at the right time. We had the rain, and on top of that, we are blessed with many lakes and the irrigation system that is available. Then secondly, when it comes to the land availability, it is more than enough to cater to a 21 million population. So there is no need for us to look at productivity over this period of time. Then thirdly, when it comes to fertilizer, obviously it is an election topic which always comes out, and you end up giving subsidies in fertilizer, and you end up over usage of the fertilizer in our ways of working in the farms, and you end up covering all possible inefficiencies that comes. So what I'm trying to summarize here is the fact that we have been blessed with unlimited resources have not pushed us to think differently. The mindset change doesn't come simply because you can have a normal day in the farm and finally end up managing your ways of working. After working over these almost 8 collection centers working with the farmers, working with almost having significant volumes of vegetables and fruits getting purchased on a daily basis from the farmyards. One thing that we have seen is that it is changing. Although we have still not faced the real brunt of climate change, but there is change. The rains that used to come at the right time is not coming at the right time. The sunshine that was supposed to come at the right time is not coming through. And that what has meant for a business that works with this crops is that two things that are happening is that the quality of the crop has come down. Unless you have the water, the rains coming at the right time or at the right temperature, you end up not having a good quality product. That leads to wastage, and that leads to a unhappy customer at the other end. Secondly, what has also happened is that the price of the product has also stabilized at a much higher baseline. Over the years, you'll find that always vegetables and fruits the prices have continuously grown. And what has now happened is that it is settling at a higher pace. And the implication to the normal consumer in this is that we monitor the average inflation of the actual basket. When I say actual basket, it is a little more detailed, because we monitor the actual consumption of the consumer and then look at the weighted average price increases on a monthly basis, which is a lot more accurate than the official way of looking at the inflation, simply because this is the actual consumption. And what we also see is that one of the most sensitive price fluctuations into a basket of a consumer is the vegetables and the fruit prices. Whenever those prices go up, it has a significant implication on the price of that average basket. So what has happened with the little climate change impacts that we have already faced is the average cost of the basket has increased. Inflation is at a higher level. The quality of what we are consuming has deteriorated. And thirdly, of course, some failures of certain crops. Even today, we talk about the rice, and we were expecting a bumper harvest in April, May, but it didn't come to that extent. And the implication is now already the government is looking at importing to manage until the next harvest comes. And that means food security, impact to the food security as well. So Nishta, these are indications that we are having a problem, but mindset change becomes significant. And why I'm saying mindset, our biggest problem in that mindset change is coming from the fact that we have been blessed with unlimited resources up to now, and making that person change now is the biggest challenge for the entire nation. That is how I will look at where we are at the moment, Nishta.
Okay. Charita, you mentioned about the quality and the certain unpredictability in output. I think Dilhan also spoke about yield. Have you seen any experience in where you, through best practices, you have managed all those, improved quality as well as the yield?
Yes. So on that, Nishta, one thing that because of this fluctuation in one thing, the quality as well as the need for us to have a decent product, a better quality product at the right price in the market. One thing that we as a corporate decided for us to get it right is to see how we could start taking control of the situation, because we couldn't allow it to be left to the elements to decide for ourselves whether the quality is going to be bad or good or whatever. So we trialed in a lot of these farms with a lot of work. One thing was the knowledge, imparting the knowledge. One thing is that the farmer is willing to change if we can also show some benefit to them. And we did that. Then we have also partnered with different donor agencies, including MDF, in trialing certain stuff that include handling the the mesh in terms of handling the pest control, the greenhouses, drip irrigation. Then mostly importantly, there's something called a GAPS certification, good agriculture practices. All these are linked with to ensure better productivity at the farm gate, and to get the farmer to be starting to think differently, using different technologies to all that. And each time that we trial something, we have achieved significant benefits in different areas. One thing is the usage of water has reduced by about 50%. The pest problem has reduced by about 60-70%. The yields have increased after doing all that by about 25%. So that is what we have done as a business, simply because we had to get it right. And in that context, doing this we have seen the benefits. Now the question is that the incentives that are there for us to work and get it right is significant. One thing is simply because our consumer needs a better quality product, and we need to get the right price and consistent availability. And that is an incentive that is there for certain corporates as well as certain exporters to get it right. Now, the question, Nishta, for us to replicate that model across the entire island, the question is that what is the incentive structure that should be in place for both the farmer as well as for the consumer, as well as for the greater public to get that right. I think that is when I was sort of thinking about this entire thing, I think that is where we will need to think about what is the incentive structure that we need to put in place. Sometimes it might be mandating certain stuff as well. So that I guess that is something that we should dwell a bit on as well.
Yeah, thanks. Excellent, Charit. Excellent. Thanks for showcasing some of the results, which makes it that it works and it can be a successful. I like to move on to Rohan, Fernando, Rohan, and also maybe Dilhan join us later in terms of answering this particular question. What are the interventions within your own firms to tackle the climate crisis? Rohan, you can come up with some examples how Aitken Spence is managing.
Yeah, thank you, Nista, and thank you for inviting me to be on this panel. I'm specifically referring to LPTR Plantation, which is owned and managed by Aitken Spence Plantation Management. So all my examples are confined to that. We have a very comprehensive and robust strategy that addresses climate change and sustainability. As you know, Aitken Spence as a company has been at the forefront of sustainability for the last probably more than 15 years. And that culture has invaded the plantation company as well. We have a three-pronged strategy towards climate change and sustainability. One is in one pillar, we have the agriculture and processing strategy, which focuses on so many aspects, doing the right thing, best practices in agriculture, best practices in processing, and so on and so forth. And then we have one on the left extreme, one on the right extreme is what we call the Design 2020 strategy, which is a strategy which is looking into the next 5 to 10 years, which covers economic transformation, leadership development, that is developing our leaders, and then the social transformation in the plantation. As you know, plantations are 100 years old, and we have made a conscious effort to transform our thinking towards our workforce and everybody else. And in the midst of all this, integrating in the center, as it would seem, is our sustainability strategy. And our sustainability strategy is aligned to some of the SDG goals. For instance, one of our main focuses directed at climate change is the strategy of water retention, rainwater harvesting, improving our soils to ensure that water, fertilizer, we get the best benefit out of fertilizer, that there is no runoff in terms of rainwater. Now, just to give you one example, today we are having a lot of rain, even in Colombo and even on our estates. But, the North Central province, places like Dambulla, Trincomalee, it was only a few days ago that there was rain. Until then, they were parched, bone dry. So we took this conscious effort by seeing these examples and then thought that, look, there's so much of runoff and so much of wastage of water in some of these areas where rainfall is quite heavy, even in the low country. And we consciously built this rainwater harvesting strategy. And we've actually harvested about 250 million liters of rainwater with almost 80 rainwater harvesting ponds. And that's how we manage our drought. Still, I must confess that despite all this, mitigating drought effects and the effects of climate change is not easy. Having been a planter almost for 50 years, I can tell you how weather patterns have changed from the day I started in 1972 to what it is today. Those days we could have predicted the rain. We know that the rains came in March, April, another monsoon in the northeast, and that's how we managed our planting and all the other agricultural works. But today it has completely changed. There's nothing like that. We don't really know when rain will come. You don't know when drought will come, and associated with all these phenomena of rain and drought comes pests and disease. So there is a I would say, a interwoven strategy that needs to meet these things. And sometimes, planning for the future does not help. We need to think on our feet. We need to take quick decisions to mitigate some of these strategies. Like I said, those days, there were certain pests that came with rain or with the drought. But today, those pests come irrespective of rain or drought. So how do you manage them? So I'm just giving you a few examples of some of the challenges associated with climate change. So I'll just focus on the sustainability strategy of Atkins Fence plantation. So our sustainability strategy, our concept is you first build the process. You build the process and then you build your strategies. It's like, we build before rather than building after. And that has been our ethos even in Atkins Fence. We build before so that, we build our fences, we build our concepts, and then we move into, the mitigation strategies. Because today, climate change, as, Dilhan's very eloquent background he gave, today it has come to stay. It's like night follows day. Climate change is today here. Yesterday, some of you may have seen on TV, in Iraq and Syria, there's no water to drink. Canada is experiencing extreme heat in those areas. So these are all, changes that none of us can predict. We can only be ready and remember that this earth is not our own. This has been given by our ancestors for our future generations. And therefore, people like every one of us have to be mindful of, ensuring that we give it back to the next generation in a better form that it was given to us. So getting back to my specific strategies.
Yeah, what are the interventions that Atkins Fence is doing to handle this?
Yes, so one is as I told you, the rainwater harvesting, specifically related to your question. Then we are reducing the application of chemical weedicides, pesticides, by almost 80%, and supplementing them with cultural, mechanical and biological methods. Then we have increased the green cover, what we call, of cover crops in all our plantations, so that again, there's better water retention. Then we have got this Rainforest Alliance environmental management system. Another strategy to mitigate this climate change is we are going on a very heavy focus of renewable energy, both hydro and solar power. This is, I'm talking specifically in the plantation company, and also coupled with planting of bamboo and other fuel wood, because bamboo today is a crop for the future, all related to the conserving the planet and the mitigation of the climate change. Another strategy in terms of the rainwater harvesting is to educate our employees, because today people don't realize the value of water, they waste it. So we have educated our workers that they need to harvest the water, even which is running off their so there are gutters, and even in our factories. So that's the extent that we go to educate people, because
Okay.
as I think Dilhan quite rightly said, this is not something that one company or two companies can do. There is a concerted effort, including from the government. Like I told you, how do you account for a situation when, 1/3 of the country has a drought and the other 2/3 there's rampant rain? So how do you manage this? How do you manage these kinds of situations?
Okay. Thanks, Rohan. I will come back to you again.
Okay.
Dilhan, I like to sort of briefly showcase what interventions at Dilma is taking place right now.
Our principle, Nista, has been, the understanding that the scientific knowledge exists in Sri Lanka. So we have looked at collaborative activities, bringing academia into the equation, because this is not something that we can do on our own, but also bringing people in. So in fact, at the moment, we are judging our Ecovation Awards, looking for sustainable solutions to address environmental issues. But summarizing a few of the interventions, we set up a Climate Change Research and Adaptation Center on Endana Estate, which is a collaboration amongst universities around the world, where we are researching, adapting international solutions and demonstrating them for local farmers. And of course, looking at our own agriculture, looking at new systems like agroforestry, looking at what I mentioned, using marine seagrasses for fertilizing, using different methods that are more climate friendly. A few years ago, we have a center, the MJF Center, Mary J. Fernando Center West in Moratuwa, where we researched and adapted the use of biochar in tea. Fantastic, amazing tool in that area. Looking at sensor-based, we are testing sensor-based drone-enabled precision agriculture to address the need to be more responsive and to be more efficient in our response to agricultural issues in plantations. And I think importantly also, we have tried, like with Ecovation, to involve the community in reforestation, in agroforestry, because ultimately it's the surrounding communities, and we need to understand that no agricultural entity can exist in isolation. So bringing in the communities, helping them, first of all, to understand the situation, exactly as Rohan mentioned, but involving them in agroforestry, giving them the benefit and helping them to grow with us has been a big thing. But looking at the same time, we have our MJF Center East in Calcutta, where you have a completely different set of problems. But there, what the community needs is again, we talked, I think Charita mentioned the fact that there is traditional knowledge, and inertia is a huge issue that we confront. So what we try to do is we try to show them new crops, more climate adapted crops, in some cases better seed, where we can access the better seed, and then to help them to adapt locally to the changing climate, the warming climate. But there are crops that are adapted, that have been developed, that will help build climate resilience. And then I guess ultimately for any plantation business is to look at crop diversification, because biodiversity is critical, not only where the crops are concerned, but also where the species are concerned. So in Endana Estate, for example, we uprooted 40 acres of tea to build a nature corridor between the Valankanda and in the Singaraja ecosystem there. But I think ultimately our focus has been on soil regeneration. It has been on irrigation, similar things, concepts that Rohan mentioned, but also involving the community and making sure that our staff themselves understand and embrace the change, so that together as a business we can move forward. That's a summary which I hope is adequate.
Thanks, Dilhan. Thank you very much. As we continue the discussion, I invite all our participants to sort of pose specific questions to some of our panelists. I'd like to welcome Ms. Vikramasinghe. Shia, thank you very much for joining us. I just have this question to you as to how your CBL group finding the challenges of climate change and with regard to agri retail and export sector.
Thank you, Nista. Sorry I had to join late. So climate change is very real, and there are definite challenges, but like everything, I think how we approach it is we look at the root of where we can make a difference. So, starting really from inputs, what are the best inputs that we should be using to get good quality output. Sri Lanka has very, very poor infrastructure for agri-storage, which also, quite apart from climate change issues, it also impacts the whole value chain. So what we focus on is a lot of training at ground level, extension level, incorporating, the risks associated. So we focus on giving a guaranteed price when because we work on a backward backward integration model where we work with small holder farmers. So while we give them a guaranteed price, we also try to give them a guaranteed output. So how do we do that in light of what happens? Drought cycles are not predictable now as they used to be. So water conservation and using water efficiently, for example, is important, and how to maximize, during the two planting seasons where appropriate, how to maximize your output and how to intercrop when it's suitable. And it's heartening that it's a slow process, as both Dylan and Rohan indicated, but there is impact. If I can share an example, a couple of years ago when I was in the East meeting with some farmers, one woman who had 1.5 acres to 2 acres of land was cultivating papaya, groundnuts, and passion fruit, for example, and she was getting an income, which fluctuated from about 100,000 to 150,000 rupees a month, whereas the average farmer in that area was, closer to 30,000. So, and the difference that she had done on her own, I think taking heed into a lot of these extension services that we do is she's done her own irrigation system with her well, very methodical and very, very planned approach to things. And it pays dividends. So while the challenges are there, I think if we can educate people and give them the tools and the infrastructure, I think we can overcome a lot of things. One of the tools that we are also bringing is we have a program, we've tied up with the UNDP to bring meteorological weather information to the field. So, for example, while it goes to our extension staff now, we are in the process of developing a mobile app where real-time information can be relayed both ways. So farmers can relay information as well as receive. And I think this is the type of technology that is going to be necessary to overcome the challenges that we face with climate, to take appropriate action at the right time.
Thanks, Shia. Thank you very much. I'd like to move on to one of our partners, International Water Management Institute. And I'd like to welcome Mr. Amarnath, actually, to list, in your opinion, what are the real concerns in terms of climate change in an agribusiness?
Thank you, Mr. Nistar. Am I audible now? Yeah.
Yes.
So my apology for the delay due to another United Nations meeting was ongoing. I listened to all the eminent speakers here, and it is very clear from the recent report from IPCC, this calls for rising temperature and the extreme events we are talking about. As a note of action that the South Asia, we are looking like in the next 20 years, we are looking at more than 5 times the wet period are expected. It means the chances of having extreme flood event or the possibility of rising temperature lead to drought scenarios, like the other speakers have spoken about. I think with the country like Sri Lanka, with the shift in monsoon, the climate variability, it is important that the right set of adaptation solutions are available, not just at the policy level, but also ensuring that the communities are understanding the valuing of science-based knowledge, which is very important. And on the second set of impact is about twofold. One is we talk about how do we improve resilience in the yield system. So when we talk about yield, farmers talks about the income. And when we talk about the income, we need to talk about the development focus. So I think Mr. Dilan spoken about how they are providing intervention, likewise other interventions spoken by private sector. I think it's a time of how we better prepared to so-called the United Nations refers to build back better. I think we have excellent institutions in Sri Lanka, and it is time that how do we converge and develop core pathways on providing solutions in the field level. For example, one of the interventions we are talking about bundled insurance solution, which is very important in times of climate shock, where the farmers are ready to take a lot of financial risk, taking capital loans from bank or from the microfinancing institution. I think it is important that these institutions are working together, like whether it's a seed company, whether it's a weather data providers, like excellent work done by Dialogue, providing the community-based awareness information or forecast data. So I think when we package of practices to the farmers as a delivery model through the SMEs, I think we have a lot of agri startups are coming, financial institutions are growing in a country like Sri Lanka. It is right time that we look at some center of excellence or some tech solution groups to take some of the academic research coming from universities, from agriculture university, etc., to look at how we provide a package so that the private sectors would look really like a scaling model. So I think the product like Bixa, what we are working with MDF and other partners in this forum to ensure that the seed companies, the insurance company, the weather provide aggregate a model, and then the farmers manage this risk and provide a timely intervention in the ground. One of the example we are doing now in 6 districts in Sri Lanka, where we are providing a maize variety, which is tested and proven by Haley's and CIC. We are reaching out directly to the delivery of seed, because when the farmers getting a seed, often they are getting fooled saying that it's a climate resilient seed. They are just a hybrid seed. So we need to ensure a specific soil, specific climate condition, what soil seeds should be used. And when these interventions are provided through the research-based evidence, I think the valuing of private sectors will step in there. And the farmers really don't want to miss any of the climate shock. They want to reduce the climate shock, providing better intervention, wherein the livelihood income is mitigated in the years to come. So I'll stop my intervention, but I would be happy to come back and share any other additional points. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Amarnath. Thank you very much for that input. I have a few more questions, but I like to make it interactive. So I'm going to take some questions from the audience. 2 questions, I think specifically, maybe the panel can shed some insight. What measures taken to reduce your own greenhouse gas emissions from your operations? And are there any best practices others could follow? Something related is, as leading agribusiness, how do you measure your footprint? Any guidance for the sector? Maybe Dilhan, Shia, and maybe Rohan can respond to some of these.
So maybe in brief, I mean, there are accepted protocols for measuring, depending on whether you want to. In our case, for example, we are measuring from the estate all the way to customer site, whether it is New Zealand or Australia or wherever. And so we need to be quite specific, scientific. It's a very elaborate methodology. But then in terms of mitigation, there is the credit system. But beyond that, what we try to do is to look at energy audits that will help us to implement the most efficient manufacturing systems. I mean, that involves fairly heavy expense, particularly when you look at a debagging machine, which is sometimes $1 million a pop. But still, so it's about measurement. It's about adopting the accepted protocol. It's a little complicated for me to sort of go into the detail of that, except there are multiple agencies in Sri Lanka that I would help with that. But I think the most important thing is to look at moderating behavior, whether it is simple behavior in terms of, I mean, energy is a big part in our business, but also distribution costs, looking at vehicles, setting a target for the use of hybrids, for use of electrical vehicles, etc. So there is no one easy solution. It's a complex one that depends on your specific activities. And I'm sure Shia and Rohan will have very different suggestions based on their operations.
Okay. Rohan and Shia, how do you all, any way to measure?
As Dilhan said, that there are agencies that do this, but I think what we do in our companies is we try to benchmark annual targets that we want to achieve internally. And I think one of the most important things is this is not about one or two people trying to, achieve some kind of number, but it's really about raising the sustainability consciousness of people. So what we have tried to do in our organization is all these interventions that we are doing, for a lower carbon footprint, for example, is to get everybody involved in it. We have multi-sectoral teams from all, aspects of the business getting involved, so that we're raising awareness, and we are also communicating. We're communicating by doing these kind of measures. We've saved so many trees. We've had, so we are right now, our focus is a lot more internal than external, because I think you need to get your house in order, and everyone needs to understand what this journey of sustainability and the challenges that are coming with climate change.
Okay, thanks. Charita, there, I think 2 questions. Rohan, you want to add anything? Or?
Whatever.
Yeah.
Yeah, basically, if I may talk of one method, mitigator method is, we have built, basically developed our own organic compost. For the last year, I think, developed almost 5 million kilos of organic compost, so that we reduce the effect of artificial fertilizer, and also we use less and less of the chemicals, to control pests and disease, and use otherwise more natural methods to combat some of these pests, particularly in our tea and rubber. And also, I told you, I think earlier, about increasing green cover. So these are, like Shia said, we do a lot of internal stuff. Then reforestation. Today, on one side, whilst we practice commercial forestry, we do a huge amount of reforestation. Then also we plant various types of crops which fix nitrogen in the soil. All these are with the idea of climate mitigation, and ensuring that we do good business for our people. And I can't agree with the other panelists more that education is one of the most important things, and also one of the most difficult things. So we have a very robust education policy strategy of educating the workers from the grassroots level. So that's in a nutshell some of the things we do.
Thanks. Charita, I think 2 questions. One is about this famous sort of perennial problem about wastage, 35 to 40% wastage from the farm. And then also how, in terms of sustainable packaging, I would like you to respond to those 2 questions.
Yeah, so I quite agree with you when they talk about this wastage factor. I mean, for many generations, we have been talking about the transportation and how there's wastage post-harvest, and various numbers have been thrown saying that it's like 40% of waste happens to all that. One thing is I think it's that holistic view finally on how do you manage it. I think a few years ago, I think the government mandated that you should transport your produce in trucks, in crates, instead of the conventional ways of carrying it to whatever. But it is a little easier said than done. I mean, as a supermarket chain, we have implemented that in terms of from the 8 collection centers that we have gone to the extent of giving crates to the farmers, so that even from their fields, the produce is brought to the collection center in the crates, and we go on the basis of a single crate, right from the farm gate right to the outlet situation, simply because we see the benefit of reducing the touch points. And simply because if you reduce the touch points of the produce, the deterioration starts faster. And that's what we are minimizing by getting that same crate right up to the outlet situation. So we have gone to that extent of reducing the perishing part from after it is harvested, and that means, of course, then it comes at a certain cost of transportation, simply because the crates, when you transporting crates, you actually carry a lot of air also. While the normal way that they put it into gunny bags and send it, you really stack it up to that highest thing. And also, but we have seen the benefit simply because the wastage has come down, and it's almost zero wastage right to that route, right to the outlet. But the question is that, again, how do you holistically implement something like that in this entire country? Simply because we need to understand the method of transportation. Is that it's one way it comes with the vegetables, and going back, they take something back to the village. So how do you manage that? Then how do you manage the handling part? Let's say we have the Manin market and now the new vegetable place. But for you to be handling crates in any of these locations, you need to have that infrastructure in place for you to manage it. The way that you unload the vegetables, you need to have certain dollies and various ways of handling. So if you are to go down that road, somebody will have to look at it from end to end of handling that process as well. Unless we take a step and handle it that way, this wastage figure that we have always been talking about will continue to happen, simply because there's, again, I go back to that incentive scheme. How do you incentivize somebody to handle it? So that is where it is. But we have seen a lot of benefits by handling that logistics part post-harvest in minimizing that wastage. So that's how I would look at it, Nisha.
Okay, thanks. Yeah, thank you. I know, Charity, you tend to bring the macro facet, but I think our mandate is to focus more on what the companies are doing. I just want to ask all the companies as to, I know leadership matters. I think Dilhan spoke about mindset change. How are you leading this change within the organizations? What sort of best practices do you advise to companies who are trying to make it as a culture within an organization? So I want the panel to sort of list maybe 3 things that you would want, what has been successful for you in terms of giving leadership.
Nisha, if I want to start off, I will start with how do you set the agenda in the organization, starting with the core purpose of that. And in that context, let's say, as Dilhan, then Rohan and Shia mentioned, that there are certain elements each organization is doing. But how do you put it as a primary core purpose in your ways of working? Even for that matter, let's say carbon footprint. How do you get it done in your different businesses? Now, in the supermarket business, one thing that we are doing is that getting all our roofs covered with solar panels, so that you reduce and go into solar. How do you minimize on wastage? And that will drive that behavior I mentioned about. How do you always look at how minimizing, so that how it gets impacted finally is that if your consumption reduces, that is another way of managing this climate change rather than wastage. So that conversation, if you run it, it then trickles down to each and every element finally, where you're going to work with less resources to maximize on the opportunity. Now, I also would want to mention that this conversation of climate change and managing it will also come as a bottom line benefit as well. Of course, you will need to make some initial investments, but it will have a return as well. So this behavior sustainability to all that has a return as well. So I think that is also important to understand that this will not come at additional cost, but finally there's a ROI in different forms that will come in as well. So in summary, it has to be a conversation that you are driving in your business, as well as then it has a benefit as well. That's how I would look at it, Nishan, and that's how we have run it in our business.
Yeah, I know John Keels and most of the company, but okay, have you been able to measure it now? You know, put it in rupees and cents now that you have had a fairly long journey. Is it quantifiable now?
It is, and we see that benefit coming in, as well as we have the annual targets that we put and a method of evaluating the benefit as well. So it is coming through.
Okay, Shia and Dilhan also, maybe, I mean, 3 quick takes to how to ensure there is leadership within the organization, effective leadership.
So what we have done is we've kind of integrated sustainability into our business. And very briefly, when we started CBL, one of our first projects was to develop a high protein biscuit for school children. So it's always kind of been in our DNA to work with community, and we've just actually taken it to a greater level now. And I think showing purpose in what you do right throughout your organization, it actually generates what's the word I'm looking for? People feel they're doing a purposeful job. And this is the feedback. I mean, we do, get feedback from our staff. So, for example, sharing information within the group, whatever someone does, we have platforms where we share all our information so that within the group, people know the different types of initiatives we're doing, and we're all on one page on that, which gets people thinking in their own SPUs. It's a self-generating way of, I think, creating awareness, which has worked, I think, very well for us. And we've invested, and we are walking the talk. We are investing in solar power. We are investing in smart technology for agriculture. We spent over 500 million rupees last year on agriculture infrastructure. You need to walk the talk as much. It's not only about talking.
Okay, thanks, Dilhan.
But I think similarly, but if I can share a slightly different example, I think earlier, I believe it was Rohan who mentioned about targets. And I think for us now, we set the macro targets, and the macro targets are very important for the reasons that Shea also mentioned, because it aligns everybody. So we set a target to be carbon neutral by 2020. We achieved it by 2017, but entirely due to A, collaboration, B, the commitment and the contribution of our team. But the complexity of it is such that it filters down. So that overall objective, that business objective, filters down in different areas. And now if I can mention the second part of my response, as an example, working with supply chain to understand, because that is one of the most potent ways that a business can impact climate resilience and help other businesses. We each work with hundreds of smaller businesses that either supply our packaging material or whatever. So we set a target, 2030, we must be carbon negative. So that process involves scrutinizing every element in our supply chain, from the machine manufacturers in Italy through to the packaging material manufacturers in Sri Lanka, Australia, or wherever. We have set a target. You have to achieve a barrier material that will give us an 80% barrier to protect our product, its quality, its antioxidant goodness, etc. But you have to deliver a home compostable product. So we're not there yet because technology hasn't reached that objective as yet. And if it has, it's only experimental, what you see. But the important thing is we are also setting targets for our suppliers to know that if they wish to work with us, they have to achieve this objective. Therefore, we are seeing incremental benefits. One comes up with industrially compostable material. We say, okay, fine, let's go with that. We test it, we trial it, we work with them. And I think that's one very important way that we can all benefit and make sure that our commitment to environmental and social good is magnified by building that same resilience across our supply chain. It takes effort, but it's worth it because you're seeing hundreds of small businesses that may otherwise get lost along the way, that we can give them a hand and say, look, this is how you can do it. Whether it is a small agriculturalist looking for a crop, we have some suppliers to our F&B unit that are producing fabulous artisanal produce, but they're struggling because you can't produce curd the way you used to. You have climate issues. So then help them. Okay, let's talk about let's do some experimentation. Can you do cheese? Can you do mozzarella? Can you migrate your product simply using some of the things that are as easy to access as the internet?
Okay, thank you.
Mr. Can I add something?
Yes.
Yeah.
Short one.
One of the things I want to say is in Atkins Spence plantation, we go on the basis that what gets measured gets implemented. And as I told you at the beginning, we have a sustainability strategy, which is coming right from the top. We have an expert in sustainability who is guiding us and advising us in Dr. Ravi Fernand. You may have heard of him. We have a monthly sustainability review meeting guided by him. And then we have sustainability teams at every step in the company, at state level, at divisional level, and at head office level. And as I said, we measure every month, our progress. That's how I gave you figures of rainwater harvesting. That's how I gave you figure of how much of green cover we have planted. That's how I gave you figures of organic, compost fertilizer production, how much has been implemented, and so on and so forth. Because we feel that that's the way to go. Otherwise, it's only becomes just a talk and nothing else. So our sustainability strategy is driven from the main board of directors and implemented and reviewed every month. One other thing I want to say is that, look, whilst we know that climate change is coming here to stay, we try to get away from this commodity concept of, depending more on tea and rubber and stuff like that, and go into areas where we have better control of water. And one such area, talking of food, which Charita has been talking of, is we are the only company out of the plantations to get into to all 4 berry production: strawberry, raspberry, blueberry, and blackberry. And this is with this idea of ensuring that we also contribute to food security. Then we have soursop to complement that, all with this whole idea of that we try to ensure that we move away from this narrow focus of always depending on rain and so on and so forth. So that's my very quick remarks. And we are aligned to 8 SDG goals in our strategy.
Understood. Okay.
Thank you.
Yeah, thanks. I know Dilhan mentioned about partnership with Morotua. There is a question actually asking what are the any other tabs or arrangements with universities in this journey of being climate friendly businesses. Shia, Charita, do you have any examples where we're working with universities?
If I'm to go on that, yes, I think there is a lot of knowledge in these organizations. We have worked very closely with certain agriculture faculties in the country, and I think they have a lot of knowledge, especially what is relevant to the Sri Lankan context as well. And there have been a lot of benefits that we have derived by working with these organizations. I think what we end up doing is that we throw at them a challenge as a business we are facing, and we have trial with them certain solutions, and it has worked for us, Nisha.
Okay, thanks. Shia, any collaboration with universities?
Yeah, universities and Department of Agriculture. For example, we completely eliminated the use of chemical fertilizer for cultivating soya by fixing the nitrogen at ground level. And this was achieved by a lot of collaborative work with University and Department of Agriculture. I think it's very important. I think collaboration, you bring in new ideas. We also do a lot of collaborative work with some of the UN agencies, addressing some of the fundamentals. Actually, the problem with climate change is because it affects the fundamentals. And when I talk about, our project with the UNDP, where we are trying to get real-time information to the farmer's hand, that is a change in a total way that they would have access to doing things. We also, earlier we mentioned about seed programs. I think it's very important to have the right seed material when you're planting. And again, we've been so focused on importing seed varieties. We actually put in a big investment to generate our own seed production for soya and corn. And not only that, it needs to be stored properly. So there's a lot of infrastructure. So, there's a lot more that can be done.
Okay, fine, thanks.
We do work a lot with the university. One of the best examples is, you may have heard about palm oil and the controversy surrounding it. We work very closely with the Ruhuna University in trying to do more and more research. Then we are working on the same area with the Moratoa University and also the Department of Agriculture, where our strawberry project and the Soursop project is concerned, and with the Wayamba University, which is doing a lot of good work on plantation agriculture. So every one of us, I'm sure, works with the university, because that's one of the ways to go. And there's so much of talent in these universities, and we value their input. Then University of Peradeniya again has been helping us in the palm oil factory. So that's the lot.
Excellent. I think it's a good message coming from all the private sector leaders that there is scope, there is progress in collaborating with the universities. I'd like to move on to Dr. Amarnath. I know you mentioned about crop insurance and climate resilient seeds. Can you expand what has been the response from the farmers in terms of crop insurance? I know it's sort of always recommended, but is there real sort of a convincing approach from the farmers and all the companies that you work with?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Nishar, for highlighting this intervention. And again, if I speak of crop insurance, seed, and integrated farming system, I just want to highlight two important points here. One is a lot of speakers spoken about the leadership. I just want to highlight one of the challenges we have seen across from the research is the multi-scale polycentric approach is missing. So in the sense, we have a lot of barriers across the institutions, whether we talk river basin authorities, whether we talk national institution, farm-led producing organizations. So there are a lot of bottlenecks there. So I think each of those areas we need to certainly look at how do we minimize those trust and deficit on that. Otherwise, what happens, one side we have private sectors can provide a lot of intervention, but they do need the support of public sectors, and also the role of decentralizing this intervention. So that I would like to highlight. Now, coming to the crop insurance, I think it's not new as such to start in Sri Lanka. There are a lot of evidences and pilots have started in crop insurance. Now, what we have seen is that each of those is more like a silo. Silo interventions are never provided a convergence. So when you go to the farmers, it's all about providing a package. So they are asking that provide an intervention where we can provide scaling solutions of minimizing the production losses or maximizing the income. Now, we have developed in the last Maha season what we call is BIXA, bundled insurance with seeds and weather packages, and also the buyback model we are developing for the coming Maha season with companies like CIC. What exactly it means that we provide 4 intervention at their doorstep. One is providing a weather index insurance. against any peril. It could be a drought or flood. The second intervention is providing a better seeds that are field proven, tested to a specific soil condition, the rainfall. Often when you go to the seed distribution, something is available in the ground, people will start using it, or someone is providing a financial inclusion package, they may not aware of what seed to be introduced. So I think research really needed, collaboration with Department of Agriculture or with the Agriculture University is very important to provide tailored seed varieties, whether it's a flood or a drought. Because, for example, we have seen our evidences that if moderate rainfall of 11 days of excess moisture, even those plants can mitigate those risks in a crop like maize. And also the pest and weed management is a very important aspect. So we are providing regularly SMS advisories to those farmers who are interested and rolling this product. It's more on a demand-based product, not as a supply-driven product. And the last segment is that we work with Sanasa, and now we are trying to work with AIAB and others to look at the largest safety net program you can go. So when you provide the combined intervention, what happens is that the farmers really see people are working together, looking at one solution, that how do you manage climate shock, and also guaranteeing the income. And the last segment we are working is the buyback model. Now, CIC do have an other intervention of buying the seeds from the farmers itself. So we need to have some smart farming contracts again, looking at the current legislation issues or any other problem. If you address that one, the seed distribution is going to be quite easier. The selling product from the farmers will be easier. And we have commercialized this product about $11 to $12 in India quite successfully. About over 11,000 farmers are rolling out this product. Now we are rolling out over 100,000 farmers with Bayer and other big private players who are interested in this intervention. So I would say that with the organic fertilizers, we are moving and private sector is going to step in. It might be a good direction. We look at convergence here rather than looking at a silo-driven approach. So that's what I would highlight here. We have rolled out in 6 districts. Now we are trying to look at also the pepper-based weather index insurance product. A lot of high-value crops are also need to be looked at in the year, because you never know what weather shocks is going to happen, when it is going to happen. So this is a good intervention I would highlight at this particular forum here.
Okay.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Dr. Amarnath. I mean, I get the impression that it's more, you deal with more institutional farmers. I mean, my question is, how challenging is it to really reach the ultimate farmer who will go for a direct crop insurance? Is the farmer intelligent right now, or is he risk averse?
No, so we are just carrying out currently, due to time of pandemic, we are unable to do the impact evaluation. So 6 districts we are currently doing in Vavuniya, Kurunegala and Anuradhapura and Ampara and Munaregala. All these districts we are implementing it. But the thing is, we are trying to come up with the blockchain technology now. So because in times of pandemic, you can ensure that the functionalities and rules are developed so that the farmers can easily at their doorstep get those seeds. So it's a very ambitious plan we have. But again, the goal is how do we collate these private sectors and also ensure that the farmers get an inclusive product so that they look at solutions far behind in the coming climate change challenges. So technologies are critical here, I would say. And in times of pandemic, I think solutions like this will really need to evaluate and carefully look at more testing and approaches need to be done. That's where we are working closely with MDF to look at how we work with other sectors of private to look at the scaling models. So this is still in a prototype, I would say, but we welcome collaborating with other interventions who are already doing in this ground.
Thank you. Thank you very much. We have just last 10 minutes of our discussion. I have 2 issues. I want short answers. I know because one is technically controversial because this was discussed. I think Shia spoke about how they have moved to organic fertilizer. There are a couple of questions from the audience, so that's why I'm raising this, though is strictly we can have a separate forum on that. The shift towards organic fertilizer, is there a quick fix? I know plantation have their own issues. Charita, Dilhan and Rohan, whether you can sort of, what's the best way forward with regard to shift to organic?
If I may comment, Nista, sorry, Charita, please continue.
I mean, it's a situation of a lot of unknowns that's at the moment. When we talk with the farmers, the working with the farmers, the unknowns of how it will pan out is what is worrying for the farmer. So I think the question is that can we do it overnight, a total shift, or should it be a phased out thing? Is the question that is working in the minds of the farmers. So a very short question is a lot of unknowns at the moment to see how it will pan out is how I would look at it.
Okay, thanks. Dilhan?
I think it's a noble objective. It's an objective that we have to pursue, but there is a certain pathway. It involves regeneration of soils. It involves multiple adaptations, including the infrastructural, the knowledge, the systems and processes that will provide us, that will first of all establish the parameters. None of these have been done. So a lot of the discussion that is happening right now should have happened a few years ago. So if we look at the example of Bhutan, you can see after 20 years, they have extended that objective of going organic by another 15 years. In Sikkim, it resulted in an unacceptable increase in consumer prices. In Switzerland, it was wholesale rejected. So I think that it's a noble objective, but there is a middle path and it has to be incrementally achieved. First of all, saying, look, we have to reduce artificial inputs. That to me is an absolute no-brainer because we cannot continue on this present trajectory, but it has to be done step by step so that we don't risk a much greater issue, particularly with the introduction of, for example, if you have a population that has been depending on certain agricultural methods over centuries or decades, suddenly to change it over can introduce other use of other chemicals that may not be approved, that may not be known of, and can create far greater dangers. And so I believe it's a great objective, but it has to be incrementally, practically done with the infrastructure and the capability developed and designed alongside. But you have no arguments from me on the objective.
Thanks. Yeah. Rohan, I know, quick one. Do you like to?
Yeah, I mean, I reiterate all the comments made by my colleagues. I mean, I would add and saying it's a very noble objective, but like in anything, you have to build a strategy. And this is something long-term. And if we build a good strategy, it could be implemented, but not something that could be done overnight. That's my quick comment. And we could face unwanted problems.
Thanks. Yeah. Shiab, I know you have made some headway. I mean, are you planning to replicate your success into other crops?
Look, a part of our business is, organic agriculture. We export a lot of fruits and spices and coconut. But, as I said, the idea, the thinking is very good. But like everyone else said, you need a structure to this, and it can't be done overnight. For example, when we stopped using chemical fertilizer in soya cultivation, it took a lot of research. We did a lot of trials, and also you need to ensure that the farmer's income does not come down. So when you're converting to organic fertilizer, you need to do it in a way that your output is not reduced. So there's a lot of work that needs. It's not that you can just say, okay, from today I'm going to use organic fertilizer. It's not quite as simple as that. There is a lot of work that needs to go into. So it's challenging for sure, but it's a good idea. But we need to have a strategy, as Rohan said.
Okay. Yeah. Last question to the panel. I think I want quick answers. I know this has been discussed, but because there are some questions. Are you happy with climate financing? I mean, it also deals with the question about affordability of some of these best practices in climate friendly practices. How have your organizations manage the financing aspect, and also what would be your advice to people who feel that it's very costly initiative?
You want me to answer?
Yeah, just first one is how have you managed the financing part, and what would be advice for companies to looking to?
We have managed within our own finances, and today is one of the good things in Sri Lanka is interest rates are relatively low.
Okay.
And I also feel that, if you do the right thing, there is also a benefit. So at this stage, as a company, I can speak that we are not looking for financing. Of course, if there is, concessionary long-term financing, I'm using the word long-term financing for, large climate mitigation projects, it will be quite welcome. And that's something we don't have in this country, like, donor funded stuff.
Okay, fine. Dilhan, any inputs?
Well, I think globally, there is an infrastructure for this kind of migration. There is, for reforestation, for organic agriculture and so on. However, it is not sufficiently developed yet. I think we need the finance sector to step up and to be able to build that infrastructure. And, the reality is that when you look at the data I shared on ESG investment, you have impact investors who are looking to Sri Lanka because this is a country that we have incredible biodiversity, and in terms of funding reforestation, funding organic or any other project, Sri Lanka has incredible potential. So I think the local banks need to step up, the development banks need to step up to develop the necessary instruments to be able to reach the small farmer. But potentially, that's a huge opportunity for Sri Lanka, given the global attention and given the amount of finance that it can unlock for our small farmers.
Okay, thanks. Any other intervention from Charita? Yeah.
Can I add something?
Yes.
Oh, sorry, Charita. Shall I go ahead?
Yeah, please do, Rashia.
So no, just one more to add. Banks are always very willing to fund big corporates, but I think when it comes to agriculture, they also need to open themselves up. We need to have a mechanism where the smaller entities are funded for, to be able to invest in smart agriculture, to be able to invest in infrastructure, even at a community level. Everything is going through larger private sector. And I think we need to relook at how we are approaching this. Yes, there is some risk involved, and but I think if banks, I believe at one point, a certain component of their lending had to go towards agriculture. But I think having some kind of focused initiatives is a need in Sri Lanka.
Okay, fine. Thank you. Yeah.
Experience from our side had been that we have been able to have different donor organizations who have been willing to partner us, especially in this agriculture area. And I think one thing that most of the donor organizations have had a problem is a credible program in place for them to provide this money to. So as long as there are organizations which can provide a credible program, I have not had a problem in finding the money.
Okay, fine. Thank you. I need to sort of wrap this discussion. So, but before I wrap up, I'm thinking it's very clear from all the panelists that there is a business case for climate change adaptation for agribusinesses. So there is it makes perfect business sense, perfect sustainability from a sustainability perspective, from a corporate social responsibility purpose as well. I think it's beyond corporate CSR. It has become a business model for a lot of companies, as indicated. I like to thank the participants actually for making it interactive. I have a request for all the panelists. There are lots of individual questions which I didn't take. I would appreciate if any of the participants do email to you all directly to individual questions. Please respond so that there is continuous learning and engagement with the participants going forward. So thank you very much for all the panelists and also all the participants. I like to hand over to the partner of the event, Ceylon Chamber of Commerce CEO and Secretary General Manjuda De Silva, to do the closing remarks.
Yeah, thanks very much, Mr. And we are coming to the concluding segment of this very interesting and session on the business case for climate change adaptation for agribusiness, where we had several industry leaders sharing their experiences along with some other experts as well. I was very happy to note that we had over 200 participants right throughout the session. That indicates the level of interest in this particular topic. And as you know, this event was organized by the Ceylon Chamber of Commerce in collaboration with MDF, which is Australia's flagship partner for private sector development, and also with IWMI as our knowledge partner. So I will not try to summarize everything that was said. There was so much of content. I hope we can share this recording with the public on our social media platforms. But just to pick a couple of points, I think we talked about the sharp increase in the incidence of natural disasters, especially flooding. I think we can see that very clearly happening in the last few years. Coming from the insurance industry, I can vouch for that. So this is obviously an impact of climate change. And also it was mentioned that the cost of mitigation would certainly be much less than the cost of damage that could occur due to the effects of these climate-related disasters. And it was quoted that across the world, you would see something like 10 to 25% drop in crop yields due to climate change. And also it was mentioned that the unpredictability of the weather pattern also has an adverse effect on quality. So there is an effect on quantity as well as an effect on quality as well. I think one thing that we can gather from this discussion is, yes, we need to put all our effort into mitigating the adverse impact of climate change, but there is a limit to which mitigation can go, and that is the point at which adaptation has to come in. So we try our best to mitigate, and then from there, whatever the residual climate change risk, we have to be able to adapt to it and build resilience across the entire ecosystem. So here, I think a lot of examples were shared by the industry leaders. I just picked up a few, like rainwater harvesting, renewable energy, crop insurance, sustainable financing. So you can see that, you know, it cuts across so many different sectors. So I think if I borrow a phrase from Dilhan, what you need is collaboration rather than confrontation with nature. I think that's a very apt way of summing up really what is in front of us. So let me now just get on to my present task of thanking a few people who actually helped to make this event a success. So starting with Amanda Jewell, Deputy High Commissioner for Australia in Sri Lanka, for setting the tone with a wonderful opening speech. And also I must thank her for staying on throughout the session. I think still she's there on the call, which is something to be appreciated. And thank you very much to Dilhan, CEO of Dilma Ceylon Tea Company, for that very inspiring and informative opening speech. And thanks also to all the panelists, Shia, Charita, Rohan, and Dr. Amarnath. I think all of you contributed immensely to make it a very rich and useful discussion. And of course, my thanks also go out to moderator Nista Hasim, as always, kept the discussion very lively. Thanks, Nista. We can always count on you to do a great job when it comes to moderating a discussion. And so once again, I want to thank very especially the MDF team led by Momina Saqib, Country Director, MDF, who was really the driving force behind this event. I know from the first day we talked to each other and how much of interest she brought into this. And I hope we can continue this series because we opened a lot of topics like crop insurance, sustainable financing. I think these can be dealt with a little bit more in greater detail. So we are very happy to collaborate with you in taking this discussion series forward. Let me also thank IWMI and of course our chamber events team for organizing the event and all the participants for joining. Thank you very much for your participation. And also from the chamber side, I also want to inform you that we are going to take climate action as one of our key focus areas, and we realized that there is a gap in our committee structure where we did not have a dedicated committee to deal with climate action. So we have taken a decision to very soon form a separate committee on climate action, and then probably we'd like to invite some of the resource people on this discussion to be on that, because we need people like you to drive that agenda. So on that note, thank you very much to all of you, and look forward to joining you again at a similar forum. Thank you. Thanks.